Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. Let's quick follow up on the president of Iran. And he's 100% dead now. What comes next for Iran after the death of President Raisi? And it took the Iranians a day, but they did manage to find the crash site. This is northwestern Iran along the Azerbaijani border. And the Iranians were dumb enough to fly their president through a mountainous region in thick fog, in a helicopter that was poorly maintained and 50 years old. So no, I don't think Israel or the CIA had anything to do with this. I think the Iranians were just this dumb and careless with their own president. There is an interesting clip I found online. This is the moment that search and rescue crews found the crash site. It's about 2 minutes long, and if this is something you want to see, I'll link it down below. But the question everyone is asking, how does this affect the war in Ukraine? How does this affect Iran's relationship with Russia? Raisi's death would have serious implications for the supreme leader's succession. So the president of Iran is really just an administrator. The real power belongs to the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, and he's currently 85 years old. So he's not going to be alive for much longer, probably. And in the short term, the vice president will become the president. This man's name is Mohammed Mokber. I don't know anything about him. But the next president is probably going to be the Ayatollah's son. This man was being groomed to replace his father once his father died. But I guess there's no other options in Iran, and this guy is going to become president and then probably become supreme leader once his father dies. I don't know anything about him, but I'm guessing he's, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and Iran's strategic objectives are going to remain the same, and they're going to continue their military alliance with Russia. Putin calls Iran's Raisi a true friend of Russia, offers condolences over his death. Putin is not going to go to Tehran for the funeral. I guess Putin's a little jumpy about all these planes and helicopters that keep crashing in this part of the world. Let's get back to Ukraine. Ukrainian forces control 60% of Vovchansk. Heavy battles continue in the Kharkiv Oblast. So here's the region, and Russia's not really made any progress the last week, but you can see there's this river going north-south, and then it branches off going east-west. And unfortunately for this city, Vovchansk, this is the high ground close to the Russian border, and the Russians occupy it. So there's not much Ukraine can do to hold the north side of the city. They're going to use this river as a natural barrier to create a dividing line for the Russians. So the Russians can come into the north side of the city. Hopefully everyone that wanted to evacuate has been evacuated. But this is a kill zone. The north side of the city is going to be completely destroyed. Yes, the Russians are firing on the south, but it's not going to be easy for them to get across the stream to reliably take the southern part of this village. Here's a tweet I want to share from foreign volunteer Nate Mook. I just spoke with a Ukrainian friend on the border of the Kharkiv region near Vovchansk. I've never heard him this upset before. They are forced to only use drones because they can't fire American shells on Russian territory. Ukraine knows exactly where the C-300 launchers and invading troops are located, but can't fire on them. Russians, meanwhile, launch and retreat back across the border. Ukrainian forces are defending the country and Europe with one hand tied behind their backs. This is the big story everyone's talking about this week. This is a huge problem. Zelensky tells Reuters in an exclusive interview that Ukraine has been pleading with the United States and Western countries to allow donated weapons to be used on Russian territory, at least in this border region. in response to this attack in Kharkiv. Zelensky confirms that they are being threatened with military aid being cut off if they use Western weapons on Russian territory. Here's the clip. I'm going to read what President Zelensky has to say himself. We want to use the weapons for defense. How do we respond when they strike our cities? Their ability to strike from a distance is such because they are stationed in the villages nearest to the border of Ukraine in Russia. They strike from there, knowing we will not return fire, knowing that they can use civilian populations as cover, because their weapons are located among the civilian population of the Russian Federation, but they proceed calmly, understanding that our partners do not give us permission, as you said. And here, when we talk about ATACMS or HIMARS, or we talk about artillery shells or missiles like Storm Shadow and SCALP, we do not have permission to strike the territory of the Russian Federation, their military locations, their headquarters. It is the same for air defense systems. How do we protect ourselves from the constant strikes from Russian territory up to 100 kilometers away from a point in Ukraine or the border of Ukraine? They hit with missiles from the Russian territory. How can we protect ourselves? So I think there's going to be a policy change in the next 2 weeks from the United States and Western countries. Top U.S. diplomat calls for a change in policy so Ukraine can fire on Russian territory, at least in these border regions. The French foreign minister, their committee, calls for the exact same thing. And if I have to finally give Russia a compliment, this is actually really smart of the Russians. They want to fight this war of attrition against Ukraine, minimizing their own losses. So if they just attack Ukraine in the Chernihiv region, the Sumy region, the Belgorod region, and they only go 5 kilometers deep to engage, they can put their fuel depots and ammunition warehouses and command posts and training sites or whatever on the Russian side of the border, knowing they're safe. Then when they're ready to engage, they just cross the border to fight. Meanwhile, their aviation and artillery can do whatever they want to attack the Ukrainians trying to defend their border. So I'm sure there's all kinds of analysis going on right now and presentations are being made. This argument will be made to Western leaders that we need a carve-out. If Russia wants to play this, I'm not touching your territory, oh wait, I'm back in my own country now, game, then Ukraine needs to at least be allowed to use artillery to fire on these Russians about to cross the border. It'll happen, just like battle tanks and ATACMS and F-16s. Russia keeps saying this is a red line, but it's not really a red line. And here is a very important historical argument made by Timothy Schneider. He's a professor of history at Yale and a best-selling author. And this is really insightful, but he says we're not exactly in the equivalent of 1939, the lead up to World War II. We're actually in the year 1938.
Jim, you said that we're about to be in 1939. I'm going to agree with you in a certain way. My comparison would be 1938. This is 1938, but Czechoslovakia has chosen to fight. Czechoslovakia has chosen to fight. So you have an imperfect democracy. It's the furthest democracy east in Europe. It's not perfect. It has various problems. But when threatened by a larger neighbor, it chooses to resist. In that world where Czechoslovakia resists, there's no Second World War. The Czechs had a good army. They could have held the Germans back. It was largely a bluff on the German side. If the Czechs resist, then the French and the British and maybe the Americans eventually start to help. There would have been a conflict, but there wouldn't have been a Second World War. When Germany invaded Poland in 1939, it was invading Poland with the Czech armaments industry, which was the best in the world. It was invading with Slovak soldiers. It was invading from a geographical position that it only gained because it destroyed Czechoslovakia. So if the Ukrainians give up, or if we give up Ukraine, then it's a different Russia making war in the future. It's a Russia making war with Ukrainian technology, Ukrainian soldiers, from a different geographical position. Then we're in 1939. We're in 1938 now. In effect, what the Ukrainians are letting us do is they're letting us extend 1938. They're helping us to stay out of 1939. So my answer is no, it's not inevitable. The Ukrainians are giving us this chance, and we have to take this chance if we want to prevent a great power war.
That is so insightful. So in 1938, Hitler wanted to invade Czechoslovakia, and France and the UK sat down with Hitler and sold out the Czechs. They said, okay, you can take this territory, but that's it. You can't go any farther, Hitler. Promise us if we let you take Czechoslovakia, you won't attack any other countries. Neville Chamberlain got the agreement from Hitler. Peace in our time. We averted World War II. But what if France and the UK in 1938 had a different attitude, and the Czechs wanted to fight? They wanted to resist the Nazis. And maybe Poland joined the war on Czech side. France and the UK immediately told Hitler, no, you're not getting any more territory. You're not going to be allowed to invade Czechoslovakia. It would have been a completely different war. There still would have been a war, but not as deadly. As soon as the Nazis were able to absorb Czechoslovakia, their armaments, their soldiers, their geographic advantage to invade Poland, a completely different war. The same thing is playing out today. If Russia is allowed to take Ukraine, they're going to Russify the people, mobilize the men, and invade the next country with an even stronger hand towards the next war. So we're in 1938, and we can stop World War III if we can stop Putin and his regime today. Estonia's Prime Minister, NATO troop training in Ukraine won't trigger war with Russia. The Baltics are going to go first, but they're sending their soldiers, they're sending trainers to Ukraine. So technically these are NATO forces on the ground in Ukraine, helping Ukraine. And this is only going to escalate. I think when the Baltics go first, Poland, Finland, the Scandinavian countries, they'll go next. Then eventually the nuclear powers like France, the UK, and maybe the United States. Here's a tweet from Prime Minister Kallas. It's time to finally open our eyes. We must leave behind the legacy of seeing the world through a Russian lens. We should not worry about Russia losing. We should be worried about Russia winning in Ukraine. So let's get to the bad news for Russia. Another oil refinery strike in Russia's Krasnodar region. There's nothing Russia can do to stop these attacks. Another deputy of former Defense Minister Shoigu was dismissed. I guess he's a 3-star general, but these stars really only represent how much you've stolen from the Russian defense budget. Russia dropped another 4 glide bombs on their own city. Apparently, according to Russian bloggers, these Russian pilots got confused and they thought this was Vovchansk, but they accidentally bombed their own village again. This is almost a daily occurrence now, but another train derailed. This is in Siberia, north of Kazakhstan. I don't know if it's sabotage or just poor maintenance and carelessness. A French Scalp missile was launched by Ukraine and targeted something in Luhansk. The theory is this might have been a Russian military barracks. Using these ATACMS and long-range weapons in the occupied territories, if they can find a concentration of 100 or more Russian soldiers, they will dedicate an ATACMS or a Scalp or Storm Shadow to take out that concentration. Also in Luhansk, there was another ATACMS strike, this time destroying a fuel and lubricant storage facility. I'll link all these videos down below. So let's talk about ATACMS, because it's been a pretty good 2 weeks, given these initial strikes, but I still think the United States is going to continue providing hundreds of ATACMS over the coming months. And we got confirmation, I think, that the 300-kilometer variant, this is the M48 or M57, is striking their targets, specifically the port city of Sevastopol, to get these Russian ships. These are the different kinds of ATACMS. You've got the M39 and the M39A1. The difference is how many cluster bomblets are inside and what range it can go. But the unitary warheads, these are the ones that go really big booms. You've got the M48 and the M57. These are what are currently destroying Russia's navy. So let's reflect on this. 36 hours ago, or 2 days ago, 2, possibly 3 US-made ballistic ATACMS hit the warship Cyclone. This was anchored in Crimea and it sunk. Russians were killed, many more were wounded. But according to Russian propagandists and Western sympathizers, this was supposed to be Russia's Pearl Harbor moment. This was supposed to trigger World War III. But after all this, nothing from Moscow. They're not even talking about it. And this, ladies and gentlemen, shouldn't be surprising. It's another Russian bluff which got called. Russia's red lines have been broken again and again, from javelins to tanks to F-16s to ATACMS to NATO soldiers showing up in Ukraine, to Ukraine being given permission to use Western weapons, let's say within 100 kilometers, inside Russian territory. This is how a bully acts. Big words, but nothing behind it. You punch him in the face and he backs down because he's a coward. Ukraine's fight to defend itself is morally and legally legitimate, and every Russian knows it. So I check every clip from Russian Media Monitor to better understand what the Russians are doing and thinking and saying, and it's just complete nonsense. I watch these clips, and what they are telling their own people is nonsense. So I have to read this clip today. This is Soloveyov and Margarita Simonyan. Here's what they have to say on Kremlin State TV. By the way, we don't wage colonial wars. We fight for the Russian people and their right to live on Russian land. By the way, many of the lands of the Baltic states aren't rightfully theirs. Isn't that right? Ask yourselves this question. Look at our Belarusian friends who are putting up with all sorts of people on their historic lands. Go ahead, Margarita Simonyan. More than that, we've never waged colonial wars, unlike some others. Some time ago, when the United States truly was a country of Christian values, even I saw it back then. There was a Bible in a nightstand of every cheap motel, not to mention big grand hotels like the Waldorf Astoria. Waldorf Astoria did not sponsor this video. And people would actually read it. Later, the education in the United States was set up in such a way that people practically stopped reading. As we know, according to their own statistics, I won't lie as to the exact percentage, but it's an enormous, incredible percentage of young people in the United States who are illiterate. No one there reads at all. You won't be able to find a rich or poor house in the United States that even has one book, aside from something needed for work or studies by someone living in that household. So not a single home in America, rich or poor, has a single book that a person reads for personal enjoyment. Like, what do I make of this kind of nonsense? Like, how stupid is this? Let's get to the good news for Ukraine. The UK is going to send 100 air defense missiles this month to help Ukraine defend their skies. Thank you so much to the British people. Spain announced an aid package for Ukraine that contains Leopard tanks and Patriot missiles. Thank you so much to the amazing people of Spain. Austria to allocate nearly $5.4 million for Ukraine's energy infrastructure restoration. Thank you so much to the people of Austria. The Netherlands is going to supply Ukraine with additional YPR 765 armored vehicles. Ukraine needs all the armored vehicles they can get. Thank you so much to the amazing Dutch people. Okay, update on the fundraiser. Things are in motion. The guys at the 69th are buying stuff. It's going to take a month or two for everything to be ready and convoyed to Ukraine. We'll get those patches sent out eventually. But here's the design for the truck. 30 of these vehicles will be bought with $600,000 of the money we fundraised as a community. And I'm calling these 30 trucks Broehicles. And when they're all together traveling to Ukraine, it's going to be a Bromata. If you guys have any other clever names for the vehicles or what the vehicles can do, let me know down below. I love this kind of stuff. And we have a special thank you. This is Pete, the combat medic. I shared one of his clips last week while we were fundraising. He found out about the fundraiser, he's incredibly touched, and he filmed this thank you video for our community.
Dear Jake bro, I want to say happy birthday to you, Jake, all the way from Freedom Square in our beautiful Kharkiv. I'm standing here in Freedom Square, I'm kneeling in Freedom Square, next to a mural that a child painted. Who cares if one more light goes out in the sky of a million stars? Well, I do. Jake, and all of your incredible supporters, from me, Pete, hasta la vista, on behalf of Project Constantine, we are medics in the armed forces of Ukraine. Thank you to you and all of your very generous donors for helping Ukraine to survive, helping us to evacuate, and helping us to stay mobile. This is an incredible achievement. Well done, brother. Happy birthday. Many happy returns. To victory, do peremore, slava Ukraini, heroem slava, and happy birthday one more time. You're a legend, Jake. God bless you and all of your incredible people in your network. Thank you, brother.
Pete, if you see this video, thank you for everything you're doing to help and support Ukraine. You're risking your life, and I think you're an incredible person. So I want to share this mural. Maybe a child wrote this on these cinder blocks. Who cares if one more light goes out in the sky out of a million stars? Well, I do. If you're watching this video, if you made it this far, you're that kind of person too. Someone who thinks every life matters and what's happening in Ukraine is not okay. It shouldn't be allowed to happen anywhere else. Russia must be stopped. They will be defeated. I'm going to be here on YouTube for as long as it takes, until Ukraine is safe and secure and the Russians are defeated. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I always love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.